Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories.
While other 8-year-olds were learning cursive or chasing each other on playgrounds, Leah Morgan moved through the world like a ghost in sneakers. Each morning, she walked exactly 6 steps behind her mother, not because anyone told her to, but because she liked watching the way her mother navigated spaces not built for people like them. Her mother never rushed, never made eye contact, never pretended she belonged in the marbled halls of Virion Technologies. She was invisible by choice. And Leah had learned long ago that invisibility could be power, especially in a world that forgot to look down. Her tattered hoodie hung loose around her elbows, and her backpack, held tight with a fraying strap, carried treasures no one else would call valuable. A broken digital watch, a cracked USB, and most importantly, her notebook. It was faded and warped, filled with sketches of circuits, strange symbols, and imagined machines that could speak to phones through air or fix themselves mid-crash. Each day, Leah would settle quietly on the same bench in the corner of the lobby, legs swinging, pencil already in hand as her mother disappeared into the service elevators. Around her, the sleek morning rhythm of executives tapping on glass and murmuring into headsets blurred into silence. Leah didn't care about their heels or their badges. She cared about the logic unfolding in her mind, the blueprint of a motherboard that could heal corrupted signals. Her pencil danced over the page, faster now, as she imagined each layer speaking in code only she could hear. The world moved around her like a blurry painting, but Leah wasn't part of that gallery. Not yet. For now, she was just a shadow in the corner, small, unseen, and quietly building something no one else even knew was broken. It started with a flicker, barely a blink in the overhead lights, but Leah noticed. Her pencil paused mid-stroke as the soft hum of polished normalcy trembled. Then, all at once, the screens around the lobby went dark, like 100 eyes shutting in sync. For a breathless moment, the building held its breath. Then came the unraveling. Murmurs turned to voices, voices into panic. Heels clicked faster, and phones came out like shields. A man near the front desk slammed his tablet against the counter, shouting into an earpiece, "What do you mean we're locked out?" Across the room, a woman in a crisp navy suit broke into a sprint, her voice sharp with urgency. Remote command failsafe isn't responding. Leah stayed perfectly still, her small form tucked against the corner bench like a shadow no one had noticed, because no one ever did. But she was watching. Not the chaos, not the panic, but the pattern beneath it. Words like malware vector and kernel override spilled from suits who suddenly didn't sound so sure of themselves. Someone barked that it was the biggest client presentation of the year. Another cursed under their breath. None of them looked at Leah. None of them knew that she understood more from their fragmented panic than they did from the error messages they were now too scared to interpret. One by one, the systems failed. DNS unreachable, server reboot dead on arrival, and yet no one could tell where it had started. But Leah could feel it, like the way a crack in a windshield tells you where the break began. They were trying the wrong doors, searching in the wrong places. She pulled out a fresh page in her notebook, her pencil already moving before the panic had even fully spread, sketching possibilities, tracing questions. Not because she was guessing, because she knew. This wasn't noise. It was signal. And no one else could hear it. She hadn't meant to speak. The words just slipped out, soft and unassuming. "Have you checked the socket overflow loop?" A whisper too quiet for chaos, yet sharp enough to cut through it. The room stilled, as if the floor itself had registered a disturbance. Heads turned. A few blinked, confused. One man scoffed. "What did she say?" Another sneered, eyes scanning for whoever had let a child wander into a room full of tension and failing systems. Leah felt the heat rush to her cheeks. She had broken her rule. Stay quiet, stay invisible, stay safe. She took a step back, notebook clutched tight, already imagining her mother's panic if anyone dragged her out. But then a different voice cut through the doubt. "Her question made sense," said Eli Bennett, quiet but firm, stepping out from the edge of the crowd. His badge hung crooked on his hoodie, but his voice didn't waver. "It's a valid failure point, especially if this was designed to mimic user error." Silence. Real silence this time, the kind that leans forward. No one laughed. A few exchanged glances. Leah stared at Eli, unsure whether to run or breathe, but he didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her like someone reading code he didn't yet understand, but wanted to. "Let's not pretend," he added, eyes shifting to the frozen engineers, "that anyone here has a better idea." A ripple moved through the group. Uncertainty, embarrassment, maybe even the first whisper of hope. Leah took another half step back, disappearing behind a column, but her words had already fractured the room. She had disrupted the algorithm of authority. And even if no one wanted to admit it yet, the equation had changed. They let her sit at the terminal not out of belief, but out of exhaustion, like throwing a final coin into a dry fountain and hoping for rain. No one expected her to do anything. The tall IT lead muttered something sarcastic under his breath, and a few nervous laughs echoed, but no one stopped her. Eli pulled out a chair and whispered, "You'll need to stand on it. The desk's too high." Leah nodded silently and climbed up, planting her feet with the quiet resolve of someone used to being underestimated. She didn't touch the keyboard right away. She just stared, letting her eyes map the terrain. Terminal windows frozen mid-query, firewalls blinking in refusal, code fragments tangled like snarled thread. Then she saw it, buried in the noise, a trail that looked like it had been left for someone who knew how to see sideways. She inhaled and typed, "For grace." The system blinked. Not an explosion, not a burst of triumph, just a quiet shift. A new prompt window appeared where nothing had worked before. The room didn't gasp, but it paused. Eli leaned in, eyes wide. "Did you just—" he began, but stopped. Leah was already deeper, moving through shell layers with the precision of muscle memory. She didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved like they had rehearsed this 100 times in silence. A few engineers stepped closer, eyebrows raised. "That key? How?" One of them whispered, "We don't have personal-based fallback auth in the admin layer, do we?" The answer sat in front of them, small and hunched over a keyboard too big for her hands. She hadn't guessed. She hadn't hoped. She had known. The key wasn't in the code. It was in the human who wrote it. A father who once engraved his daughter's name into the base of a photo frame. A ghost password. A soft spot. And Leah had found it not by hacking the system, but by understanding the man behind it. Leah's fingers moved with quiet certainty, tapping out commands like piano notes only she could hear. Each line of code opened another locked door, another hidden corridor beneath the company's glittering surface. But this breach wasn't wild or angry. It was graceful, almost elegant. The code wasn't trying to destroy. It was trying to disappear. Decoy files nested inside legitimate ones, recursive traps curled in on themselves like clever riddles, and decision trees mimicked normal behavior so precisely that even advanced diagnostics walked straight into dead ends. But Leah didn't follow the logic paths others would. She moved diagonally, sideways, doubling back only to step forward again, reading the system like a story half told in a language she'd taught herself. Her breathing slowed. This wasn't just a network failure. It was a puzzle. And not just any puzzle. One written by someone who didn't want to be noticed, but desperately wanted to be understood. The further she moved through the layers, the more the lines of code stopped looking like blocks and started to feel like a voice. Not shouting, whispering. A quiet dare left behind by a mind that thought it couldn't be found. Leah didn't hesitate. She'd lived her life in the margins, piecing together meaning from fragments. Now, the system was speaking in a dialect only she could answer. And she wasn't just solving it, she was having a conversation. A single line of malformed syntax caught her eye, not because it was wrong, but because it was familiar. Leah's pulse skipped. She stared, blinked, leaned closer. The structure, the variable names, the signature quirks. It wasn't exact, but it was unmistakable. She had seen this before. Years ago, crouched beside a flickering monitor in a borrowed internet cafe, scribbling notes from a hidden forum thread no child should have found. Digital phantoms, symmetric disruption. One post, no replies, just a line. It's not about breaking in, it's about becoming the door. She hadn't fully understood it then, just felt its pull, like a melody half heard in a dream. Now, staring at the evolved version of that same logic, Leah knew this breach wasn't random. It wasn't corporate sabotage or careless revenge. It was a message. Written by someone who had once followed the same forbidden rabbit holes, searched the same corners of the internet, written code alone in silence, just to feel power over something. This wasn't just an attack, it was a reflection. And for the first time, Leah wasn't sure whether she was chasing a virus or meeting a mirror. Her hands hovered, not from doubt in her ability, but fear of what it meant. If this was written by someone like her, someone unseen, self-taught, burning quietly in the shadows, then who had they become? And who was Leah becoming? The terminal blinked, waiting. Her heart thudded. She took a breath and kept going, because stopping now would mean admitting she was afraid of the very mind that understood her best. From behind the glass wall, Richard Vale stood frozen, arms folded, jaw locked, as he watched the tiny girl in the oversized hoodie navigate his company's crippled system with the ease of someone born inside its bones. Executives whispered, engineers exchanged wide-eyed glances, and someone muttered a prayer when a sliver of green returned to the central screen. But Richard didn't move. He didn't breathe. His gaze never left her. Leah sat perched at the edge of the console, her notebook untouched beside her, her fingers dancing across the keyboard in fluid rhythm, unaware or uncaring of the boardroom full of men who had spent the morning shouting and failing. She wasn't guessing. She was answering something only she could hear. And Richard, a man who had built empires on logic and dominance, felt the steel walls of certainty around him bend. She reminded him of someone. No, not someone. A memory. A flash of a dirt path outside an orphanage in Abilene. A girl crouched over a broken radio, grease on her fingers, laughter in her throat. She vanished before he ever asked her name. He buried the image like he buried everything that made him feel too much. But now that forgotten ghost had returned in the form of Leah, calm in the eye of chaos, decoding what no adult in the room could touch. He felt a crack open inside him, one that data reports and quarterly projections could never fill. Leah wasn't just solving a breach. She was breaking the silence he'd built his career on. And for the first time in decades, Richard Vale didn't feel like the most powerful person in the room. They called her back the next morning. No limo, no ceremony, just a quiet message relayed through a night supervisor. Leah didn't ask why. She packed her notebook, tightened the strap on her worn backpack, and followed the same bus route she always had, only this time her mother didn't walk her inside. The halls of Virion felt different, not because they had changed, but because now, so had she. She was led to a sleek conference room where a single blue chair waited at the far end of a polished table. No one smiled too brightly. No one patronized. They watched her like someone they hadn't figured out yet, and for once, they didn't try to pretend they had. Eli sat nearby, notebook in hand, offering her a small nod that steadied her heartbeat. An older woman with sharp glasses asked the first question without preamble. "How did you do it?" Leah blinked. "Which part?" There was a pause, then soft laughter, not mocking, but startled, respectful. "The override," someone added, "the shell navigation, the layers." Leah's fingers curled around her pencil. She didn't have the words for what she had done, not the way they wanted it. So she reached for her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and began to draw. Not code, not diagrams, something in between. Logic rendered as landscapes, loops as rivers, syntax branching into organic shapes only she could fully read. She didn't speak, just filled the silence with graphite strokes. When she slid the page forward, no one moved at first. Then Richard Vale reached for it, turned it sideways, and stared, not as a CEO, but as a man seeing a new dimension unfold. It wasn't a blueprint of the system. It was a map of her mind. And in that moment, the room understood. Leah hadn't just solved a problem. She had revealed a world. He didn't send a car. He didn't bring an assistant. Richard Vale simply showed up, standing at the edge of a narrow alley with polished shoes dusted by the city's forgotten corners, clutching nothing but a memory and a name. He knocked twice before the door creaked open, and Leah's mother froze, broom in hand, eyes wide with fear. "Did she do something wrong?" she whispered. "No," Richard said gently. "She did everything right. I just wanted to see her world." Inside, the apartment was small, cluttered with wires, torn cushions, and the hum of lived-in silence. Leah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a plastic tray of salvaged electronics like they were toys only she could understand. She looked up, unsurprised, and handed him a broken radio. "Can you fix this one?" No greeting, no fear, just a challenge. He took it, hesitating, remembering hands that once knew how to twist wires and listen for static. "I used to," he murmured. "Then try." she said, passing him a screwdriver. As he knelt, his knees cracked with age and disuse, but Leah didn't comment. She just watched. In the kitchen, a boy shouted for pancakes, and Leah called back, "Your turn, Mario." Richard blinked. "He your brother?" "Cousin," she said. "Everyone kind of lives here now." The mattress in the hallway, the toothbrushes in a single glass, they told stories no boardroom could comprehend. Yet nothing felt broken. Everything had a purpose. Leah didn't study in a lab. She was the lab. She wired knowledge from scraps, soldered ideas from ruins. When he asked how she learned all this, she shrugged. Nowhere. It just started making sense, like math, but with sparks. And as her cousin lit up a capacitor too fast and got zapped, she laughed, not mocking, but delighted. Richard laughed too, startled by the sound. In that cramped room of broken fans and taped-up windows, he saw something clearer than any spreadsheet. Brilliance uncoached, unfiltered, and utterly unshakable. She hadn't waited for opportunity. She had built it with bare hands. The next morning, before the city even stirred, Richard Vail rewrote the company's internship policy with a stroke of his pen. Age requirements, GPA filters, background checks, all gone. In their place, a door wide enough for someone like Leah to walk through without apology. He named the rebuilt firewall Leah Protect, a quiet tribute to the girl who held the system together when no one else could. But even that didn't feel like enough. So he picked up the phone, not through legal, not through HR, and called Leah's mother himself. "No contracts," he said, "just a conversation." When they arrived, he didn't lead them to some back office. He brought them to the boardroom, the room where futures were usually bought and sold, and sat Leah at the head of the table. She didn't flinch. She never did. He told her everything. The mentorship, the scholarship, the lab that would be hers if she wanted it. Her mother cried silently, hands trembling. But Leah? Leah simply tilted her head and asked, "Will I still be allowed to break things?" Richard smiled, slow, real, unguarded. "Yes," he said. "That's how we find out what's inside." Months passed. Leah became a presence at Virion. Not a mascot, not a myth, but a force. Her hoodie remained the same, patched at the elbows, notebook now thicker with thoughts and systems only she could dream. No one questioned her when she spoke. No one laughed when she suggested rewiring a protocol. She had her corner of the lab. Above her monitor, someone had scrawled Leah's brain in marker. No one claimed credit. She never erased it. She still took the bus with her mother, still gathered broken toys off the sidewalk, still turned forgotten things into possibility. But now when she stepped into the building, her badge lit green. Full access, full trust. And one evening, long after the lights dimmed and the last elevator side closed, she left a note on Richard's desk. Folded, handwritten. Just 7 words. "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." He found it hours later and sat in silence, the paper trembling between his fingers, knowing that the system they had saved would fade from headlines. But this moment, this note, this girl, that would stay with him forever.